Welcome back to the Overnight Success Podcast. Today, we are going to be digging in on working with an empowered team. And a lot of time as business owners, we're really passionate about the business. It's our baby. We're years into this thing. We eat, sleep, and breathe the business. Like, how are different ways I can scale this business? And a lot of times we don't always think of like, how can we empower and make our team better? Or a lot of times we're working with that team and just so focused on like, how do I get this person to be better? Or like, how can I get them to work harder? And a lot of times I think it comes down to the systems and really just making sure that your team is set to do their best work, and they're really willing to like put in that extra mile for you as a business owner.
Yeah, I'm excited to jump in and talk about how it's not necessarily your team, but it is your systems, right? And having a good team, they rely on the systems to help them advance. So it'll be a good episode.
Yeah, and like we've all, Christy, we've talked like we've been employees, right? And we've been those things. Like I'm never going to be quite as passionate as that CEO, but when I go to a job and I interview at a job, I'm like, hey, I have my skill set, I have my passions. Like I want a place that's going to allow me to do that. And it sounds good. You might be in line with the mission of the company or the money or like all these different things, and then you get in there as a team member, and you're like, why am I spending more time in emails and meetings than what I was hired to do? I think we used an example in the past of like a marketing expert as an example, and like they're great at graphic design, but they seem to be more back and forth in emails and like status check-ins, and really like they're best at just doing that graphic design thing. So if you look at each individual on your team, you hired them for a reason. Like they want to do their best and they want to grow in that. They don't want to be the best system user or the best at the emails and the communication. Like they want to continue getting better at their craft. And so today I really kind of want to dive in, and at the end of this, if you've got a really empowered and productive team, your business is going to scale. Again, they might not be as passionate as you are about your business, but they're going to be a partner. I'm thinking back to, I learned from a great leader in the local Charleston chamber here, and he said there, I forget exactly what he called them, but you've got employees that are going to say we, and then you're also going to have employees that say they. And so if you have team members that say, oh, my work or my company, as if like they, like the people, like these are the things that they do versus we, like you want them to speak as a partner in this business. And I think a lot of that comes down to productivity and the progress that they're making. So let's kind of jump into this, because I think even at the high level, let's talk a little bit about where, not where teams fall apart, but sometimes where they struggle. And it's kind of one of those silent killers sometimes of, this is the way that the teams always work together. And like you might not realizing that they're, half dying on the inside.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think too, when we look at creating proper systems in place, it's a lot of times it's hard to see when you're in it. And so it's neat that we've been able to help customers through this because there's a lot of confusion and not clarity with the customers that we've worked with, I think, inside of their systems. Like the manager, the CEO, or the head person will often think, oh, this is just how we've always done it, so that's how it's the right way. But in reality, as your team grows and you continue to scale, you need improved systems and optimized systems. And so let's uncover some of those kind of breakdowns that happen when you might point the finger at your team dropping the ball, but in reality, it's probably your systems that are not quite as effective as you think they are. And your team does care and they want it to work well. So if we jump right into that, what kind of breakdowns have you seen in the past, like with some of the clients that we've worked with?
Yeah, so it one I would say is like, I don't want to say over communication, but the need to over communicate. So we've talked about this working with clients. Sometimes we're trying to reduce that communication piece. So emails, Microsoft Teams, Slack, like whatever your communication preferences are. If you always have to keep pinging people that are busy to get like a quick status update, or what's the status of this, like that is taking time, and that's creating that context switching. And you need to kind of understand ahead of time too, if you're working on a project, like who's in charge of what's the order of operations, what am I supposed to be working on. We say a lot of times, if I as a team member have to go and ask what I'm supposed to be working on, like that's a huge bottleneck. And also, if your team is busy and they're not communicating well enough, now that's frustrating. Of, okay, I'm sitting here twiddling my thumbs, I want to do good work, and I have to chase around and figure out kind of what's next. So that goes back up to leadership, I think, of making sure that you kind of have a roadmap of like what you want your team to work on for the next 2 to 4 weeks. In software development, we call those sprints. Like you plan 2 weeks at a time. But without that, you're kind of stuck in that cycle. And on the other side of it, you could say, hey, I don't want to give you just like a list of action items. Like I want to say more, give you a list of outcomes, and then give your team the power to, again, as a graphic designer, like go design this to the best of your ability. Just make sure that it checks a couple boxes for the client versus I need this very specific logo with these exact things and like done in a way that like gives no creativity. So I think there's both sides to that, but making sure that team members are not stuck in that kind of communication loop, and just let them be as heads down as possible.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I would say too, when we're looking at that, some of the other breakdowns happen. And so you mentioned communication, but also clarity and process, right? So if somebody doesn't know how something works because the system is kind of broken, then that's not on your team. That's on the leader not giving clear direction and giving your team the ability to understand how the process works. And um, where we come in, we often can help improve time and energy because we're able to say, hey, like, have you looked at it from this angle? Have you tried to automate this? When these tasks are rolling in a way that's 80% of it is often repeatable, then why do you have somebody manually doing that? So I think it's important that we're not necessarily blaming our team either, right? And they're not necessarily dropping the ball intentionally. It's our job as a leader to help them understand the why behind it and some of the actions that we take, but also how to make it the best that it can be, right? We want them to stay in their zone of genius. So, how do we do that? We look at creating the systems to help them thrive.
Yeah, and added to that too, I think we talk a lot about SOPs or standard operating procedures, and like those are great to understand. Hey, this form needs to be filed a certain way, or this presentation needs to follow a template. But it's also good to list those best practices. So at least that way, you have an expectation of like, oh, I expect this PowerPoint to have these 5 slides and follow this flow because we know that it builds up to like a great sales pitch or something like that. But if you don't have that set up with your team or you don't do that training, and then they give a sales presentation, like, why didn't you talk about X, Y, and Z? It's like, I didn't know I was supposed to. And as an employee, as I'm looking up to a leader, that of somebody that's been in the business for X amount of years, like I want to learn from you, right? Like depending, there's definitely plenty of those employees. I remember now it was like renters versus buyers. Like they're coming in, they're clocking in at 9, checking out at 5. Like that's the world that they live in. But the people that are more like on that ownership level, they want to grow themselves, and so like teach them, to give them all the best tools that they need, and make sure that they're prepared and kind of ask. There's plenty of great surveys out there of employee satisfaction surveys to understand, like, do you have the tools that you need? Do you feel empowered to ask questions and challenge leadership on decisions? Like we're kind of getting outside of systems more into the culture side of things, but all of that comes together, that at the end of the day is going to help you scale your business, which every business owner wants. I'm sure some business owners get happy with where they are and like, cool, like I can stick at this sales or this revenue for the next couple of years. But if you are looking to scale your business, like you need to make sure that your team is ready to scale with you, and you've got those right tools in place.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And oftentimes the employee is not going to understand what the goal of the goal is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless we explain that to them. And if we expect them to do a task, i.e., like respond to emails within 24 hours or even faster, and we don't explain that to them and they take a week to do it, then that's not on them. That's on us guiding them. And so I think that's a very simple example, but how could we break that down into some of the actual examples that we've worked with clients on? I'm thinking, let's hop into a Monday.com example. first of like how we were able to help a customer optimize their systems and their workflows to help not only alleviate the reduced communication, but um, excuse me, alleviate the silos and help reduce some of the communication and also improve their systems so that they could serve their clients in a better fashion.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. And so yeah, let's look at this because this particular client had multiple teams, right? So they come together once a week for a couple hour meeting, and they're given kind of status updates of where they are on the project. And all teams, it's kind of like an assembly line in a way. That they got 12-month long projects. Team one might work with the client for the first couple months, and then they hand it off to team two and team three and team four. And a lot of them need to understand like when team one's going to be done with their work so they can pick up from there. Or even within the team, thinking of website design, like we need somebody to draft the designs first, and then we hand it over to the website designer to actually like put it all together. And so when you're doing that with multiple clients, they're dealing with like 50 clients a year. They're getting a new client every week. They need to understand what the status of all those is, and they want to be able to also highlight at the same time which of those clients are at risk. They can't spend, or they were kind of spending every day is like, okay, what's the status of client one and two and three all the way to 50? And like some of them were in a green state, so like even if it takes 3 minutes to understand that they're at a green state, like that's still a long time that you don't want to spend. So I think that was a big piece, is just like bringing everything together into that monday.com so that we had visibility into it, and trying to highlight the bad, and then I mean also kind of celebrate the wins at the same time. And so I think the other piece was when we talked to the different teams, some of them, they used Monday for like the mains to make sure that they could update at the team meeting because that's what they use for the team meeting. But they were also looking at like they had their own way to track like the subtasks within their team. And so they might just use Google Docs or spreadsheets or anything else like that, which made it difficult for another team member to understand the status of those things. And so, like, there are times that on the web design side, they're obviously going to be using certain apps that the finance people aren't going to be using, that they're different job requirements. But when it comes to tracking statuses, like you want a central location. So if somebody goes on vacation or somebody leaves, you don't have to go figure out like where they had this secret file saved in their personal OneDrive or anything else like that. So kind of bringing all of that into a central location and creating those best practices is like, hey, like somebody is really good at it, and maybe it started off in private. It's like, hey, I like how we use the Monday, but I found this other system over here that works really well for me. Like, well, bring that back to the core of the team, because maybe that is a good process and the rest of the team can benefit from it.
Absolutely. You touched on so much there. When we look at a growing team, that often happens. One person likes using spreadsheets, the other one likes using Google Sheets, the other one uses numbers, and the other one is just on a Google Doc, and the other one uses a notepad. And when we start to look at the breakdowns there, it's not scalable. And so it is a responsibility of the business owner or like the leadership team to identify what tech tool are you going to use, and using a tool like monday.com as the project management system, there's so many automations, and if they're not natively in the platform, then we can also look at integrating with an external party to help automate there as well. And when we look at those check-ins, right, there's no need for a team to spend multiple minutes talking about green clients, a green quote unquote, meaning they're in good status, and we just need to visibly understand that and trust our team that they're making the progress updates. And so when we build out some of these systems, there is a little bit of pre-work that goes into it, but it's a lot faster and a lot less of work when the system is built properly and helping the business owners work on their business instead of in their business. Because having a dashboard view of that 30,000 foot view of your company and the health of your business is so integral in how you can predict future events in your business, really. And you don't have to question, are we doing the right thing or are we not? Because when you have the proper tech tool, you're tracking what's working, what's not working, you're identifying the trends and you're able to proactively show up in your company versus reactively showing up in it. So it's been really neat to see how this build was able to help save them a lot of time, but also money. It got them out of platforms and things too. So they're very exciting to work with this particular client.
Yeah. And one other thing I'll just add real quick, one of the most basic automations, but that does help cut down on communication, is we added like a watcher column inside of Monday that basically said, notify me when this task is done, because I can't start my job until they complete theirs. And so again, I didn't have to ping that person and said, "Hey, I just got done with this, so you can go ahead and get started." It's like I got notified immediately, and I can also create views of like, here's all the items that I'm watching to understand the status of those. Again, without having to go and ask people across multiple teams what the status is. Like I could just have a quick view of like, here's all the items I care about that have to finish before I start my job. So very basic automation in Monday, but a really powerful one.
Absolutely. Yeah, use your tech tools to work for you, right? Not against you, and use them to their fullest capacity. So I think it's a good transition into another client example of looking at, so we talk a lot about, we have people management and production management, right? And what we just talked about would fall under our production management bucket. We're looking at project management, we're looking at your running your business, but the other side of that, people. And if you don't have people paying for your product or your service, then you don't really have a business. And a lot of customers that we've worked with are not effectively using any kind of CRM. You've talked about it before, where they have more or less of a contact list. And so when we look at using and utilizing a CRM or a customer relationship management tool to its fullest extent, we're able to really nurture our leads and that communication all the way through to becoming a client and what we do in between. So let's talk a little bit about how the toolkit can help, and let's dive into a specific example of um, what we've been able to do and the nurturing of communication.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think so. We're actually looking at a franchise client here, which franchise clients are always interesting because they're trying to grow their franchise like business, but then they also want all of their franchisees, each of the locations, to grow. And so both of those have a slightly different nurture type than the other. But at the end of the day, they want to automate that as much as possible because somebody might have shown a little bit of interest today, they're not quite ready to buy, and we want to make sure that we stay top of mind. Or if they're on the fence, that automated communication can take them from on the fence to off the fence in purchasing your product. And so this is a lot to track, especially when you have a lot of incoming leads. We've even seen this in the home service business of they hire somebody to go just generate leads because they're running ads or some type of deal, landing pages, and then they don't know what to do with those leads once they have them. A landscaping company with 80 leads a month is great, but if they don't nurture them, then it basically turns into like one sale when it could turn into closer to 20 or 30. But back to the franchise client, our biggest thing was we wanted to take somebody that showed interest, filled out a form, and send the right amount of copy, whether it's email and or text, over to get them to convert to a customer. And this is all automated, so it's actually really cool because you get to kind of just jump in and see the status of all of those, and kind of watch the machine run with, you sit there, cross your arms, and just kind of watch the machine run by itself. But also, once you bring in technology to that, you can also track the success rate of that. And so you can see, kind of using that, the home services, like 80 people came in and only two converted. Okay, so maybe our copy's wrong or maybe the offer's wrong. And then so you continue to adjust, and now we're at like, okay, 80 came in and 20 converted. Okay, cool, 25% conversion rate, great. How do we kind of keep growing that? And then as you get that to a certain level and you identify like what's the perfect system or what's the perfect amount of copy, then like, cool, let's just like up that machine and try to get 200 people into the machine. That gives us a 30 or 40% conversion rate. But if you don't have the ability to automate that's not scalable. And if you don't have the way to view the metrics on that, then you're not going to know what's working or not working. So all of that coming into a very basic CRM in a way to just understand the different stages and where people are dropping off is just invaluable to anybody. I mean, it's just incredible how quickly that can come in. I'm trying to see here in our notes. We've got training. We already talked about the tracking throughput. I think training's a big piece. If you want to talk to that a little bit, Christy, kind of at the individual location level.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at training for any kind of tech tool, we really want to make sure our team understands how it works. But with the CRM or the toolkit, we're able to, for our particular clients, it's neat because we're able to record videos and show how it works. The other big thing is that when we talk about any of the tech tools that we use, is we really try to partner with our clients. It's not like a here's your new technology, now go figure it out. It's we're going to help build this for you, customized, and then we're going to teach you and your team how to use it. The goal is that it's going to make their job easier. If we can start to identify, for example, this customer that you're speaking to, they recognize that they wanted to automate. How do they understand how many leads and customers that particular technician has worked with in that particular day? So at the end of the day, there's a QR code, they scan it, they fill it out, and it's all automated. It goes into the system. It allows their team to understand at a glance what they did for the day versus maybe a text or a phone call or something that can get lost or a scribble on a piece of paper that's illegible. So having that one place where they come back to, and then knowing, hey, this is our SOP, this is our operating procedures and how we do work here, guided by the leadership team, allows them to really take it to the next level. And I think the biggest thing too is when you're looking at these different systems and as things are being evolved and built, there's no right or wrong answer, but there are ways to optimize it. And so, what I mean by that is, as your team continues to grow, or as your systems enhance, or as your client base continues to grow, take a peek behind the curtains and ensure that your system is still working for you. I know with this particular client, we set out, and then as they started to get new franchises, we had to improve and enhance the system because we recognized, oh, hey, this was working in the beginning, but now because we do this other little adjustment, it has allowed us to change this whole process or this whole workflow. And it's important to sometimes reevaluate that, which I think having a third party partner such as us look at those helps you train your team better because it's hard to see. Um, One of my favorite quotes is, you can't read the label if you're in the jar, right? And so when we look at training, if you're all in the late little jar, like it's very challenging to say, hey, hold on, let's take a zoom out and identify what is working and what's not. And that's where we can come in and as a third party create those trainings, and they land a little bit differently than the team internally producing those same types of training. So it was kind of a long answer, but ultimately training is extremely important. And I think when we look at the the value add of having a third party teach how to use this system, it comes through very differently.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think too, coming in as a new team member, I've been in jobs where you have a new trainer every day that you come in. They don't want to be there training you. It's just like, it's not a great experience. And again, like I signed up to come in with a certain role. I want to go do that thing as much as possible. Every business obviously has the business specific things you need to learn, like the handbook of like how we do work here. So like you can't get around that, but you want to make sure that that is as optimized as possible. And like you have those best practices in place because otherwise, Johnny teaches it one way and Susie teaches it another. And so, like, now you've created confusion for that new team member. Johnny might actually have the better way of doing it, but Susie isn't teaching it the same way. So, like, you want to make sure that you have all that documented to get them up and running as quickly as possible. And, like, if we're looking at that franchise space, you want to make sure that as a new location launches, you have a business owner that may or may not be experts in that space and like you've already learned and crafted the best practices, so you're actually kind of giving the handbook over to somebody that's not experienced to teach it to all of their team. And so the franchise is a very interesting space where you want to make sure that all of those best practices are easy to consume, and you can easily deploy that. So all of that kind of comes together and making sure that onboarding of new people, like they're set and they're ready to hit the ground running after 2 to 3 weeks.
100%. Also, I would say that this is a good transition. So we've talked a little bit about Monday.com. We've talked a little bit about the toolkit, which is our CRM. We also work with ClickUp. So let's talk a little bit about how we've been able to help customers optimize their ClickUp and what that looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're looking here at a social media company, right? So that they're managing social media for I forget how many clients they had. It was at least 20. And you've got four or five, we'll call them project managers that kind of are dealing with four to five clients each, and there's communication involved. They signed up to help create great content, and but they're also trying to update the clients, communicate with the team. The owner of the business wants to make sure that they're hitting the deadlines that they expected, because as a business owner, she was trying to deliver the best customer service possible. And so all of that is happening in a business, and you've got ownership coming kind of from all different corners. And so ClickUp for us was a great solution to help with that, because as a team member, I know all of the posts that I'm working on. I might go in and say, create the deadlines for five different clients, and those are kind of hosted in different areas, but at the end of the day or at the end of the week, I want to be able to see all of those in one spot. And so rather than going in and out of all of these different lists and seeing these different things like, oh shoot, I forgot to open up that client the other day and realize that there's a social media post scheduled for tomorrow that I got to complete. It brought everything together. And it also, with those due dates, I can very quickly see on a calendar of like what's due when, am I approaching due dates and things like that. So very quickly, I can almost work in full autonomy by myself because I have ownership of these five clients. I pretty much am only working with the client at that point. They get notified when a post is ready for their review. We baked a lot into this system, and really used the full power of ClickUp and their automations, and cut down on manual communication of sending an email and letting that client know, hey, can you review this? So I think that was like a very quick way to go from kind of all over the place into a single location and cut down on communication all at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and so what I'm hearing is like the key takeaway from all of this is that the team didn't necessarily need to work harder. The team just needed to have better clarity and systems and structure. Let's include some automations in that. Like, let's help our team work smarter, not harder, right? And I think when we look at using a people management or a production management, there's ways of going at this. And sometimes, a lot of times, the clients that we work with, the challenge is that they don't have the time to learn how these new technologies work, which is where we come in because we understand how they work and we can strategically help them build out what they know these systems can do and help them get to that optimized level in which that they know they can operate, but it's challenging when they're inside of it. So I think our systems really help us run smoother, and they help save. There's like this acronym, right? Save yourself time, energy, money. That's a system. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what system can you put in place to help save yourself time, energy, and money, right?
Yeah, and I think like that time savings automatically creates energy, right? So if I'm
Yeah.
always like kind of in this panic of did I follow up with the right client or when are these things due, and you don't have like that full confidence and ownership of what's going on as a team member, then that's just going to kind of reduce your energy and reduce your productivity. So giving a tool that I have full confidence that I know every single thing that is due within the next 7 days is incredibly powerful. And I think that is easily transferable to a lot of businesses of you cannot depend on your team members to be self-organized, right? Like we all hope, and that there's definitely some personalities out there that are going to be more organized than I'll ever be able to be organized myself. But then there's others that are kind of all over. They've got 100 tabs open. They're switching from client to client, task to task. They've got notifications on their phone. So creating that best practice again, like in a technology system, so we can very easily say, if you work out of this view day in and day out, you will be up to date with everything that you should be focused on. And it's like, cool. Like, again, I might do some other things outside of that, but if there's ever a time where something goes wrong, you kind of say, John, did you go to the my tasks view? Did you go to the my work view and see everything that was due? Like, how did you miss this? Because if you are checking on this every day when you log on, then this was at the very top of the list and somehow you missed it. And so I think that's super powerful because like then once you know that that system works for everybody, it's just so easy to trust as a business owner.
100%. Having a clear system and process in place helps create that roadmap, right? And so what you're speaking to is creating the accountability and understanding who's responsible for what, when things are due, how's the project moving along, what's the progression. You don't have to micromanage when you have good systems in place as well. So I know a lot of people are afraid of change, but at the end of the day, like it is important to look at what kinds of changes can come through. So just to, as we kind of start wrapping up here, a thought is like how can you actually implement change? And there's a few questions you can ask yourself in a self audit of sorts. Is are your team's workflows even clear? Do they understand what they're supposed to be doing? Do you have a single source of truth and system to manage your projects and tasks? Because if you don't have that command center, that one central source of truth, and you're expecting your team to make progress updates in multiple locations, or that there's a piece of paper with the tasks on it, how can you actually hold people accountable? So it's a really important piece to this. And are your communications streamlined? Or is everybody using different platforms? Again, it goes back to when we're looking at project management, how can you understand where the status of that project is if you're not actually tracking it in that one system? Or how can you understand where the status of a lead is in converting to a client if you're not communicating in one central platform? As your team continues to grow, make it simpler on them so that they don't have to go jump around and use all these disparate tools.
Yeah, and like the only thing I'll add to that, the cool thing is like once you bring it all into a central location as a business owner, sometimes you have to create the dashboards to do this, but you can have a finger on the pulse of everything that's going on. If they're not in a central system, like you immediately have the only way to understand what's going on is by asking everybody. So now that you've had this all in a central location, create the dashboards that one show you what's going on, but also if you can create the negative of that and say, help me find the bottlenecks, right? So if you look at throughput week over week, you can see dips in throughput, something like that. So again, now that you're in the technology world, the technology space, a lot of those tools will let you, even if it's just from a numbers tracking perspective, understand like what the average is and see where that dips. Or again, give me a view of all tasks that are past due, and just so you can very quickly understand that. But again, if that's not in a central system, it's going to be very difficult for you to have a very quick view of what's going wrong and what's going well in the business.
Absolutely. So I would encourage listeners to take the time this week to do a self audit. Ask, are your workflows clear? Do you have a single source of truth for your projects and your tasks and your lead communication? And are you actually connecting and streamlining your communication with your leads all the way down to your clients? It's important to look at that and check in not only with your team, but with yourself. Like, really organize and understand what is the health of your business. And if you want your team to be most productive, you have to provide them with the proper tools and systems in place to help them do so.
Yeah, 100%. I think all that's great. And I think the final thing is just working with your team. Like a lot of them probably are day in, day out. You know, you're looking at the vision and the dream and the future of your business. And for them, they're in it every day. And just so kind of just talk to them and be like, hey, like what's sticking, what's causing issues, because very quickly they might all say, oh, this is the biggest problem, this software is not what we should be using. Like they'll tell you right away. You don't even have to learn anything other than just ask. So meet your employees where they're at, identify those, have them help you identify those bottlenecks, and just work on removing them. That's what all the biggest companies do. We've talked about Chick-fil-A before. Like they might have a line wrapped around the building, but they've got the systems in place to get you through that line as quickly as possible because they focused on every bottleneck and just kept removing it until they have a well working system.
I love that. Well, I guess any words of wisdom as we close out here, John?
No, I think just systems always need to be optimized. Focus on like if you want to scale your business, it's going to be based around systems. Work with the team, figure out what those are, and just try to build that empowered team.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. We'll be back with another episode next week, and we'll help tackle your challenges and improve your systems.
Yeah, and if you like this episode or like all the things, we're going to be bringing guests on soon. We're still getting ready to interview some of those guests, but stay tuned, like and subscribe, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Really appreciate you guys listening in, and look forward to bringing some more guests and knowledge in the future.
Thanks, John.